Hey, what's up, everybody? The Third Chimpanzee, The Evolution and Future of the Human Animal by Jared Diamond. If you don't know who Jared Diamond is, I recommend you pause this video and go to Amazon and order his book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, right now. Okay, welcome back. So, Jared Diamond is technically a geographer, but he's considered to be a gifted polymath. He may otherwise be considered a historian, ornithologist, anthropologist, a linguist speaking over a dozen languages, a physician, evolutionary biologist, environmentalist, and environmental consultant, an educator, and Pulitzer Prize winning author. The author of the last book I reviewed, Yuval Noah Harari, is listed as a person Jared has influenced. And the awards and honors section of his Wikipedia page will give you some idea, but needless to say, he's a pretty remarkable and influential person. Jared's multidisciplinary knowledge and approach is one of the things that makes his work so compelling and so riveting. The Third Chimpanzee was Jared Diamond's first book, but if you've read some of his other stuff, you'll recognize themes in his writing. There are certain things he wants to convey to the reader in this book. Homo sapiens is an animal, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there used to be many different kinds of humans on the earth, but Homo sapiens is the only one left. Now, our closest living cousin is the chimpanzee, only having diverged from our common ancestor with them about 7 million years ago. Extraterrestrial taxonomists would classify us as chimps because of how closely related we are to them. And chimps are more closely related to us than they are to gorillas or monkeys. But there is something that makes humans different, something that no other animal has. Humans have been separated from the rest of the animal kingdom by what is called the Great Leap Forward, which Jared suspects is closely tied to the emerging complexification of human speech and language. And this has led to the rich cognitive array that we have today. We may be much more capable than any other animal with our intelligence, but we seem to show a lot of behaviors that don't really make sense to us. Things like taking and even becoming addicted to harmful drugs, destroying our own natural resources, committing murder, or even genocide. We've come so far that we've developed weapons powerful enough to end human life on this planet. What Jared tries to do with this book is to explain some of these peculiar behaviors through evolutionary explanations, as well as many other aspects of life, like aging. And he wants to show that even though we've created some critical situations around our world, he has faith that we can make things better for ourselves, but mostly for our children and their children. The Third Chimpanzee is broken into 5 main sections, each consisting of chapters. Part 1, Just Another Species of Big Mammal. This is where Jared establishes some of the groundwork regarding our place in the family tree of life and the places of some of our cousins. Part 2, An Animal with a Strange Life Cycle. Jared focuses on sexuality, customs, and habits in mating and attraction and aging. Of particular interest to me was how and why we tend to choose mates that look similar to us. Part 3, Uniquely Human. This is where he discusses things that only humans do, with some minor exceptions, like complex language and art, and unhealthy behaviors and addictions. Part 4, World Conquerors. This is the Guns, Germs, and Steel chapter, discussing why some of the major things in history happened the way they did, regarding which countries had access to certain geographical gifts, certain crops and animals that can or cannot be domesticated. There's also a pretty uncomfortable but important section on genocide here. And then part 5, Reversing Our Progress Overnight. This is the call to action part. This is the part about how our human abilities have gotten us into trouble. Some of the examples are how we've mismanaged resources, driving species extinct, and setting up non-sustainable practices. But Jared is optimistic, saying that we have many advantages over some of the other civilizations that have collapsed. Things like global communication and transportation, and access to information for most people. We have studies and examples of the past to help guide the choices we make today. I also think it's important to mention that this book does have a nice balance. He doesn't just state we're responsible for the extinction of this many species, but he wants the reader to ask themselves questions related to things like this. He's trying to get people to think, mostly about how what we do affects the world that we leave for the next generation, and I feel that's done in a fair and tactful way. And this book might seem like it jumps around a lot from one topic to the next, but it really does have a structure, and as you go on, you'll begin to see themes emerge. He'll do this thing where he'll be talking about a certain behavior and discuss it as humans understand it, and compare that to how else it might exist in nature and draw attention to some differences. He uses a lot of really brilliant evolutionary explanations, which I find fascinating and illuminating. There's a lot of good stuff in this book about evolutionary costs and benefits. And there's a lot of good stuff here on nature versus nurture. Like, for instance, what causes us to find certain traits more attractive in mates than others? And how does this compare in other cultures or in different times? And what influences that? Is it genetic or cultural? Questions like this and much more are answered here. But one thing I wish Jared would have done here, in case some of the readers haven't read that much evolution, it would have been nice if he could have painted the explanations in an evolutionary light that shows how evolution works the way it does. This is something that Richard Dawkins excels at. I felt that there were opportunities to explain to the reader how this blind process with no memory and no foresight is producing these results. Take, for example, his argument on the evolution of menopause in aging women. He basically states that it evolved as a way for nature to more wisely gamble the allocation of time and energy in an aging human mother. Great, but he missed the opportunity to illustrate how it was the increasing of the genes responsible for the behavior which resulted in those very genes outpopulating competing genes, which ends up creating this phenomenon that virtually all women experience today. It's not a huge deal that he doesn't explain things like that in depth, but I did feel that it could have gone a long way for a lot of people who aren't used to reading books on evolution, which most people aren't. I think that when authors pull this off right, it conveys a really nice aspect that brings things into focus and makes the work infinitely more amazing. One last thing I want to say is that if you were shopping around for books and you decided not to get this one because it came out back in 92, don't let that stop you. Yeah, there are some out of date bits in this book. If you're reading a lot of science books, you know that this is something we deal with in every book. And this one doesn't contain much dated information, and there's even a section at the end addressing this in this edition, which came out in 2006. I know 2006 isn't much better, but you'd be really missing out if you didn't get this book. This is Jared Diamond after all, but just know that you may want to cross-check anything questionable that you find in here. For example, Diamond says that he doubts if modern Europeans carry any Neanderthal DNA, which of course we now know they do. So if you're the type of reader who likes to do a lot of studying as you read, this won't be much of an issue. You could even argue that it's more beneficial to get a better understanding of our outdated knowledge to see how our thinking has changed in certain areas. So that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're an inquisitive human and you'd like to learn more about where you stand in the family tree and how things have changed through history, check out The Third Chimpanzee by Jared Diamond.